When Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. He withdrew to Galilee, a particular place. And from that time on, Jesus began to preach and say, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand," a particular time. We have a history of salvation. We also have a geography of salvation. God reveals himself at specific times, and God also reveals himself. He accomplishes his plan in specific locations. Why does Jesus go to Galilee? Why does he live in Capernaum, in the land of Zebulun and Naphtali? Because to our ears, Galilee, Capernaum, the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, hearing these names might mean little. But for God, for the first century Jew, they meant all the difference in the world. And also from that time on, we hear Jesus began to preach about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And finally, Jesus begins calling the 12. Why 12? Why there? Why then? We're given an insight from Matthew, who quotes from the Old Testament, Isaiah the prophet, "Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who sit in darkness, those dwelling in a land overshadowed by death." What is going on here? What had happened to God's chosen people? Remember from the book of Samuel, the Old Testament, and King David, the beginning of his reign. God promises King David that his kingdom, the 12 tribes of Israel, would last forever. But what went on to happen in their history? After the death of Solomon, we hear the kingdom split in two. 10 tribes in the north, 2 tribes in the south. The kingdom became divided. But then the unthinkable, even more devastating, in the year 722 BC, so about 700 years before Christ, the Assyrian exile took place. The Assyrians, the enemy of God's holy people, came into the northern part of the Holy Land and decimated it. They took those 10 northern tribes and destroyed them. It was absolutely devastating. Here, the majority of the people of God wiped off the face of the map. And guess who were the first 2 tribes to go into the Assyrian exile? The tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali. Galilee is where the exile began, where the overthrow of the kingdom started. And that's where Jesus is going to begin his public ministry. As had been promised, a light would dawn. Precisely where the exile began is where Jesus is going to start undoing the effects of the exile. Precisely where the 12 tribes were decimated and broken into pieces and scattered to the 4 winds is where Jesus is going to begin calling his 12 apostles in order to gather around himself a new Israel, and in order to establish a new kingdom. What did Jesus actually bring into our world? What has he brought? Well, there's still pain. There's still division. You might ask that question, what did Jesus actually bring to our world? The answer is very simple. God. He brought God. Light from light, God from God from true God. Jesus came to gather scattered humanity back together into one holy kingdom. He came to bring God, to reconcile us to the Father. What an amazing thing, the fulfillment of God's plan. That truly, the dawn from on high, God himself has come among us.